This is the Potter Virgin podcast, where an experienced Potter opens a world of fantasy for a Potter virgin. I'm Cassie, the experienced Potter.
I'm Teresa, the Potter Virgin.
This is episode 2, recapping chapter 2 of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, The Vanishing Glass.
So from our last episode, information will go over Bonfire Night and my prediction on Mr. Dursley being a not-so-bad guy.
So on last episode, we got kind of confused on what Bonfire Night was and if it really existed. And yes, it does exist. And so we want to go over quickly what exactly is Bonfire Night in the UK, because actually it's pretty interesting.
What did you find out about Bonfire Night?
It takes place on November 5th every year. The UK celebrates Bonfire Night with fireworks and bonfires, sparklers, and toffee apples. Information comes from bbc.co.uk. Some might have small firework parties in their backyard. It feels kind of like the US when we do Independence Day. Have fireworks, barbecues, things like that. But it actually is the anniversary of the attempt to blow up Parliament.
Oh.
I know. I feel like it's very weird that they would celebrate the anniversary for the attempt to blow up Parliament.
That's funny.
So it also is called Guy Fawkes Day. Guy Fawkes was a part of the gunpowder plot in 1605. He wanted to blow up King James I and his government.
Wow. That's pretty heavy. And the way the newscaster talked about it in chapter 1, he's like, "Oh, come on, guys, it's a whole week away. You don't need to celebrate now."
It's so interesting that like the origins of this holiday were about blowing up the government. He wanted to blow up King James I and his government because of religion. England was a Protestant country and the plotters were Catholic. They wanted England to be Catholic again, which they thought they could do if they killed King James I and his ministers.
It's kind of interesting though that they bring up the Bonfire Night and how this is a celebration of something that happened that was really terrible for one end but good for another end. And so they're thinking that the fireworks, the shooting stars that they're seeing right now and the celebrations are part of Bonfire Night, but it's really about another end of something terrible for somebody, for another group of people.
Yeah, it is interesting that they bring that up because it does have parallels to each other.
Interesting. Very cool.
Fawkes and his group put out 36 barrels of gunpowder in the cellars beneath the Parliament in London, ready to set off a mass explosion. However, one of Fawkes's group sent a letter to a friend who worked at the Parliament, warning him to stay away on November 5th. The king and his supporters got a hold of the letter, and the plot was rumbled. Guards broke into the cellar where the gunpowder plotters were waiting, and they were arrested and executed.
Nice. I mean, that's intense history.
It didn't actually work. Nothing was blown up. And then we now celebrate it. It's just so funny to me that England would celebrate this as a holiday, where now they have bonfires and sparklers and toffee. It feels to me like it's like 4th of July.
Yeah, it's very much the same.
But I'm sure that they don't actually celebrate the reasons for Bonfire Night anymore, especially because that was in 1605 and now it's 2020.
Yeah, I mean, the Independence Day wasn't a very clean fight either that we celebrate on the 4th of July.
And this definitely was not the UK's independence. Last episode, Teresa, you had some pretty interesting predictions about Mr. Dursley. You thought maybe he wasn't so bad of a guy. What are your thoughts now?
Well, I gave him 5 wands right in the middle because I thought maybe there was some promise there. I swear that I felt that there was some promise. But no, not so much in this next chapter. Vernon Dursley is not a good guy at all. He's very terse with Harry, and he almost wishes that Harry wasn't around. But both the Dursleys are not nice to Harry at all. I found myself putting in the margins emojis, the open mouth emoji with the big eyes. Like I was doing that on the side margins everywhere because I just couldn't wrap my head around how they were treating Harry. It was terrible in this chapter.
All right, that gets us into our recap of chapter 2, The Vanishing Glass. Nearly 10 years had passed since the Dursleys had woken up to find their nephew on the front step. The Privet Drive had hardly changed at all.
They go in to say that the only changes can be told by the pictures that are hanging in the house. That's the only inkling that time has passed, but that time has passed for the Dursleys because there's no pictures of Harry anywhere, none of his family, none of him, nothing. It says it's almost like you would never know that there's another child living in the house.
And then Mrs. Dursley knocks on Harry's door and says to get up. And where is he living?
He is
in a cupboard,
like a little storage area underneath the stairs of their house. It's terrible. He lives in this cupboard, but not only does he live in it, so that was kind of like one of my questions. He lives in this cupboard. This is where he sleeps, but then also that's where he goes for punishment.
It's just like sending your kid to their room when they get in trouble.
Well, when I send my kids to their room, like go to your room, it's not necessarily, yeah, it's a punishment because they can't be in the rest of the house, but they have things in their room that are comfortable, you know. Harry doesn't have anything that's comfortable. He's in there with a bunch of spiders. The spiders are everywhere, he says. For him to sleep there at night is one thing, but then Mr. Dursley says, you know, this one time he's warning you, nothing funny, no funny business, or you'll be in the cupboard for now until Christmas. They don't let him out. The rest of the time he's allowed out, but when he's in there for punishment, he's in there day and night.
I wondered, when did they start the cupboard? Was Harry in or sleeping in the cupboard from night 1 when he was only a little over a year old?
I'm guessing so. I mean, I have a lot of questions for them to go from when he's like such a small child to 10. It's like such a big jump for me. And that's where like a lot of my questions are coming from in this particular chapter with Harry and his memories, what he knows, what he doesn't know.
So do you think at night 1, Harry was stuck underneath the cupboard so the Dursleys couldn't hear him cry or miss his parents?
Out of sight, out of mind.
They could just ignore
Yeah,
him.
I think that he's been in there for quite some time. I don't know how, you know, I mean, he's used to it. He doesn't like being in there, but he's used to it.
How long do you think Dudley slept in the Dursleys' bedroom?
He slept in their bedroom?
Well, I mean, a lot of overprotective parents will keep the kid in their bedroom for a really long time.
I don't know. I don't get that feeling. I didn't read that specifically from the book. I don't really get that feeling that he does. I think that they overindulge him if he does sleep in their room. It's part of their overindulgence of him for sure. But I don't get that feeling that I don't have those details to say that he sleeps in their bed or not.
Teresa, it doesn't all have to come from the book.
Well, I know that, but to me, I would think he wouldn't want to sleep with his parents. I think he likes to have his own space to do things. And I think the Dursleys would rather not have him in their bed because they give him everything he wants just to keep him quiet because it's easier. So I don't think having him in their bed is a pleasure for them because it would just be more time with their rotten child.
But they love their rotten child way too much.
I don't think they do, honestly. I think that they just give him what he wants to keep him quiet. There's the part with his presents, and he's counting his presents, and he's like, there's only, like, where is it? How many did he?
36.
There's only 36. That's 2 less than last year or something like that. And they're like, oh, well, don't worry. You still have your other presents coming from your auntie. And we'll buy you 2 more when we're out today. And he's like, oh, okay. I don't get the feeling that they really love him. They just want him to shut off. I think they had a child for the sake of having a child. I don't think they had him because they actually wanted him.
So their overindulgence of him is just to make him stop being a
bother to them.
Interesting. That's really interesting. I never thought of it like that.
That's the way I take it. I mean, shoot, I'm not gonna lie. If my kid's throwing a fit, sometimes it's easier just to give them what they want to make sure that they're quiet. It's not good parenting, but it works in the moment.
So they are just work in the moment type of people, and they love him, but
I think they worked in the moment so much that it's just the way they live now. Like they can't go back and, tell him, okay, Dudley, you can't have this. They can't go back. They can't change he's already rotten.
Do you think the Dursleys like their kid?
No, I don't. I think they leave him alone a lot, quite honestly, because he's beating up other kids, not just Harry. He's mean to other kids, and it's not solely centered on Harry. He's mean to them all. So I think if they were to see that, they may not want that, because who would want, I mean, they're so worried about what other people think about them in their normal life. If anybody brought it to their attention, they wouldn't want their son doing something that makes them look bad.
That's a really interesting perspective.
I really don't think they love Dudley. If they loved him, they wouldn't do what they did.
They really don't love Harry, though.
No, not at all. They never even refer to him as Harry. They can't even bring themselves to say his name. It's always the boy, him. I really don't think they like children in general.
So they were not meant to be parents?
No.
They should have been child-free, and then they'd just be happy all the time, because who wants kids?
I think that just, helped them become more ordinary. They're married, they have a house, he has a job. Does Miss Dursley work?
It never mentions whether she works or not, so I assume that she is a stay-at-home mom. So they want the suburban lifestyle.
They had a kid because they were supposed to. That's what you're supposed to do. And now they have this spoiled, rotten child who they don't like, who throws fits. So you just give them things to keep them quiet.
Interesting. And then they got stuck with Harry, and so they're like, man, we're like, now we have two kids that we don't want. But this is what we were supposed to do. We were supposed to keep him. If people found out that we didn't keep our nephew whose parents died, then they would look down on us.
But they got lucky with Harry because he's not whining and crying and throwing fits like their own child.
Why do you think that Harry doesn't demand more attention?
I just think that that's who he is. I think because he wasn't given it to begin with, so he doesn't know that it should, he knows that it should be different, but they wouldn't give it to him anyway.
And when he does ask something, they say don't ask questions, and they put it in the cupboard. Do you think they actually lock the cupboard so he can't get out?
I don't think so, because he made mention of, once they leave, he can come out and watch whatever he wants on the TV. So I don't think lock him in there necessarily, unless maybe he is in trouble. No, because he even talked about, when he is stuck in there for punishment, how when they're asleep, he sneaks out and he gets food.
Do you think maybe when he was younger, though, they might have locked him in?
I don't think so, because it's kind of like a learned behavior. He knew that at some point he could sneak out in the middle of the night and go get food. It's not like something he newly discovered. It's just something that he does.
Moving on to Dudley's present. You mentioned that he got 36 presents and they're going to buy him 2 more. That is a whole lot of presents.
A whole lot of presents. And it was like crazy things. Like a new VCR and a second TV that he wanted. And there was 16 video games or something of that nature. It's just a ton of things.
And this was taking place, I think, in the early 90s, and those things were so expensive. So they probably spent way over $1,000 for this kid's 11th birthday.
And they said they always spend the day going to an amusement park or whatever, and out to eat at restaurants and things like that for his birthday. And this time they were going to the zoo, which seems like something very simplistic for them to do, is to go to the zoo.
Yeah, I'm surprised that they didn't do something bigger.
Yeah.
I mean, they did just spend over $1,000 on his present.
This chapter is, when I read the title of it, I wasn't expecting it to be so much not about the vanishing glass. I mean, that doesn't happen till almost the very end of the chapter. This was mostly just about the relationship that the Dursleys have with Harry, but then it also opens up about Harry's powers. Going back to what you said about how he's not allowed to ask questions and how he's subconsciously using his powers, one of the biggest questions that I had in this chapter is, what did Dumbledore's letter say to the Dursleys? Did he tell them to not tell Harry about his past? Did he tell them to not allow Harry to ask questions, because they wouldn't have answers for the questions anyway? And did he mention anything about Harry having powers to the Dursleys?
The Dursleys would know that Harry would have powers. Both of his parents were a witch and wizard, so it's most likely that he would have powers himself.
Do we ever get to know what Dumbledore's letter said?
We get to know parts of it. I don't think that we ever get to know the full context, though. And the whole letter bugged me in the last episode. I thought that Dumbledore could have had a conversation with him. But what bugs me even more is that nobody ever comes to check on Harry.
I'm not so sure about that. I think that there are people around that are watching him all the time. Like a few of the characters, a wild looking woman and a bald old man and a tiny man. And remember how I had mentioned how colors are significant, like the green and the purple? So these people are very specifically described as being in particular colors. Like the tiny man at the end of chapter 2 he's wearing a violet top hat. Why does it matter what color his top hat is? Why are they only telling us his top hat? What color are his shoes? What color are his pants? So they very specifically bring up violet, which is a shade of purple. And then there's a wild looking old woman dressed in all green. There's a bald man in a very long purple coat. I think there is people watching him. And I think now that his powers, that he's using them more subconsciously, they're going to start to come to light. I think they were probably just waiting for Harry to discover the powers for himself, because he knows that they're there, but he hasn't really questioned them. Like his hair grows. And was that all the time? Has his hair always grown since he was a baby? And why does it grow? Like, what does that have to do with anything? I mean, I know wizards have long hair and beards, but is that why his hair grows the way it does? What's the significance of his hair growing? What's the importance of that? What does it do? So I think that these people, as Harry's powers become a little bit more prominent, are going to step out of the woodworks now, because that could be potentially harmful for Harry, these powers that he can't control yet.
If they were really looking after him, though, wouldn't he have less abuse from the Dursleys? So why hasn't Dumbledore or is there not like a wizarding DPS or something come in and check on Harry to make sure that he's okay?
Wizarding DPS. I think they needed to keep him away from any potential harm, because we don't know where Voldemort really is. We don't know if he was killed or destroyed or whatever. I think they needed to keep him a little further hidden until he came of age. And I don't think Voldemort would look for him within Muggles, especially Muggles that were known to hate him.
Okay. Maybe the wizarding world couldn't have checked in on Harry, but why does the Muggle world not send DPS on the Dursleys? Because
they lose both
they
their
can
children.
See, exactly. But they can see that there's obviously a difference between Harry and Dudley. Harry is very skinny and small, and Dudley is very
big and chubby.
Yes. And also, Dudley is a total, like, Dudley always bullies him. Is there no parent-teacher conferences that the Dursleys are required to go to for Harry? How has no teacher really seen that there is abuse going on between the Dursleys and Harry and sent somebody to check in on him?
Because then we wouldn't have a book.
Okay. But don't you think that somebody should come in and check on Harry?
Well, I mean, I don't know if they're physically abusive to him. I mean, emotional abuse is just as bad, but I don't think that there's any outward sign that would tip people off. You had mentioned earlier, because I had asked the question in our last episode, what other people's opinions of the Dursleys are. And you had said that would come to light later. I think people just turn a blind eye to them for whatever reason. I don't know if that comes out later as to why people leave the Dursleys alone. Maybe it's just because in their pursuit of being so ordinary, they're really just odd people that nobody wants to have anything to do with. I mean, we already know that Dudley is such a terrible little child that nobody wants to hang out with him. They don't want to piss him off, but they don't want to hang out with him. He's only got the one friend, that Pierce kid
I think it's
that goes to the zoo with him. I mean, that's his only friend. And he probably has just been bullied into being his friend.
So they just ignore the Dursleys because they don't want to deal with them?
I think so. I think they're just such terrible people that nobody really wants to interact with them. They have Mrs. Fig. Mrs. Fig watches Harry once a year for Dudley's birthday. That's it. I mean, if they had a friendship with this woman, if she was somebody that they relied on more, I mean, she could watch Harry a lot more than just once a year. And then they talk about Marge. They call her Auntie Marge, right?
Yes.
Who is she?
She's Vernon's sister.
And they're like, well, we could call Marge to watch Harry. And they're like, oh no, she hates the boy. She hates him. But why does she hate him? What did Harry ever do to her? Or does she just hate him because of what the Dursleys have told her about Harry?
I think that's a big factor.
I don't think that these people are a big part of their lives. I don't think they're around much. Like Mrs. Fig, I don't think she comes around any more than just that once a year when they dump Harry off. And Marge, I don't know if she hangs out much with them at all.
And Marge would always take Vernon's side. I think that they told her a lot about they didn't tell her that his parents were wizards.
Well, of course not.
But they just said that they were good for nothing. They were terrible people. And I think that she just assumes that Harry's that way and doesn't want to deal with him. Marge does come up later.
They're like, oh, he's just as weird as his parents were. So yeah, I mean, that brings me back to like, what did the letter say? Did Dumbledore tell them the truth about what happened to Harry's parents? Did he say keep him safe? I don't know. There has to be a reason why Dumbledore left Harry with the Dursleys. There has to be a clear reason, a sound reason for that. Either because he wanted to keep him out of the wizard world, because if Voldemort wants him dead, there could be other people that want Harry dead. Obviously, because he's very special, as we've been told, there's something different about Harry, and other people might want him dead too.
I will say that does come up in the future, but no spoilers.
So even though, we may not agree with Dumbledore at this point, I do believe at some point there will be sound reasoning as to why he was left with the Dursleys.
There is reasons why he left him with the Dursleys. Even after I've read the books so many different times, I still think that there could have been a better person. There is definite reason why Dumbledore left him with the Dursleys.
They all go to the zoo. I still don't know why they chose to take Harry with them. I know that they were to leave him home because, he might burn down the house or whatever. But it was very interesting to me that their final decision was to take Harry with them to the zoo.
I agree. I feel like there could have been another solution to not have to take him to the zoo. They really could have just left him at the house, and the house wouldn't have been burned down unless Harry accidentally did magic
that he didn't know.
And then they said that they could leave him in the car. Like, that's cold.
While they're driving to the zoo, we get like a little bit of where I was wrong about Mr. Dursley. Not only is he like rude to Harry, but he hates everybody in general, really.
He's a grumpy old man, but he's only in his 30s.
He said while they drove, Uncle Vernon complained to Aunt Petunia. He liked to complain about things. People at work, Harry, the council, Harry, the bank, Harry, were just a few of his favorite subjects. So this morning it was motorcycles. So the motorcycle is pretty prominent in this one because it goes back to Harry's memory of being with Hagrid, actually, on the motorcycle, being dropped off. When Uncle Vernon is complaining about everything, he says the council. Who's the council?
Maybe like the city council or the government?
I don't know. Okay.
Maybe that's what it's talking about. For one, if someone is complaining that much, we need to go to some therapy, because the reason we're complaining, like I will admit that I can get on a set of complaining and really be grumpy about the world. And that's why I'm in therapy, to work through those issues.
My original thinking that Vernon was not so bad kind of makes me think that maybe Aunt Petunia isn't all that bad. Maybe it was her husband that poisoned her thoughts in her mind against her family.
Maybe. Why can't they both be bad, though?
Oh, I don't know. They probably are. I mean, they certainly are. But how does one get that way? I can't assume that Mrs. Dursley always had a terrible relationship with her sister. It didn't seem to happen until, she married a wizard.
And it could have happened before she married a wizard, because Lily and Petunia were muggles. They weren't raised in magic, and Lily developed magical powers, and that's why she ended up being a witch when Petunia isn't. With Uncle Vernon and the motorcycle, so Harry says that he had a dream about a flying motorcycle. And Uncle Vernon nearly crashes the car when Harry says that. Even if he was angry about, like, oh, maybe he's talking about some magical thing. Okay, Uncle Vernon needs to have some chill, because kids have imaginations, and kids might think, hey, a motorcycle flies. But now Harry's going to be like, why did he get so upset when he said that the motorcycle could fly? He nearly crashed his car.
Well, I think it touches on the unordinary, and he hates anything that's unordinary. So they finally get to the zoo. They buy Pierre and Dudley, like, whatever they want, large chocolate ice creams, and they only had to buy Harry that lemon popsicle because the lady asked before they had a chance to, scurry away with the kids. We finally get, like, Harry's true opinion of the Dursleys. Like, we know he doesn't like them when they're in the reptile exhibit and they're looking at the snakes, and he says he wouldn't be surprised if it had died of boredom itself. So he's talking about the snake that won't move. No company except stupid people drumming their fingers on the glass trying to disturb it all day long. Dudley and his dad had, like, rapped on the glass. They were, trying to get the snake to wake up.
With that, reptiles are boring. Okay? They are. I don't understand why anybody has a reptile as a pet, because they just kind of sit there. The only time that they get interesting is when they eat, and that's disgusting. I don't want to watch a snake.
They need to eat like once a week. They don't even need to eat every day.
And so I don't understand why people have these as pets. Why did they expect them to go into this reptile house and all of the snakes to be, like, trying to kill people or something like that? Yeah, they're going to be boring. Sorry, Dudley. Sorry, Vernon. And Vernon is a total jackass, being like tapping his hat, like tapping his fingers on the glass. I'm sure that there was a sign that said, don't.
Oh yeah, there most definitely probably was. But Dudley, he whined at his father to tap on the glass, and so of course he did.
And this is boring. Yeah. Reptiles are boring. Get over it, Dudley.
This particular snake was not boring, though. He just didn't want to entertain these stupid people.
Well, I could say that that's boring. Like, he's just chilling. Yeah, I'm boring when I'm just chilling too. Harry says something.
And the snake responds by shaking his head. And Dudley is watching this whole interaction happen between Harry and the snake. But what's interesting to me is, why does Dudley find it, like, so strange that Harry is talking to the snake? Because it's not like the snake is talking to Harry. Harry's just, like, looking at the glass, talking to the snake. I don't know why Dudley is so, like, up in arms about that and has to tell on him and be weird about it, unless Dudley has already seen or experienced some of Harry's powers. And so that feels the need to, like, go all crazy about him talking to the snake. So the snake was, like, pointing towards the sign and in answer to Harry's questions.
That's what he's finding interesting, not the fact that Harry's talking to him. He just finds it interesting that the snake is finally moving.
But I think that Dudley has probably been instructed by his parents to tattle on Harry when Harry does something unusual.
Oh, maybe, yeah. But it's not Dudley that notices.
Is it Pierre?
Or
Pierce?
Yeah, it's Pierce. Yeah, Pierce.
He says, Dudley, Mr. Durst, come and look at the snake. You won't believe what it's doing.
It's not Dudley that's noticing all of this happening.
But he's the one that brings it up later, though, too, at the very end.
He just doesn't go over and, like, stand next to Harry. He puts him in the rib. Can we get some chill in the family? Vernon needs to chill. Dudley needs to chill. Just go and stand next to him and see what's going on. That's the reason why the glass disappears, is because Harry got pissed off that he was punched in the ribs.
Yeah, I think like what Harry thinks is what happens with his magic. But I don't understand the hair thing. I really don't understand that. I know when he had talked about how his aunt had butchered his hair, he didn't want to go to school because he was afraid people would make fun of his hair. And then the next morning it had grown back. But his hair grows all the time anyway. So I don't understand the hair. But
Well,
what he thinks is happening. So, like, he thought about this poor snake and never have been to Brazil and never have been out of this case. So he was thinking about that. How else can the snake get out but to have no glass there?
well, I think with the hair thing and this thing, in both instances, Harry was feeling like angry or upset.
Mm.
When Harry's angry or upset, that's when things tend to happen. When he ended up on the roof, he was trying to hide from Dudley, and so he was probably feeling angry, upset, scared, and so something happened. Right now, that's how his magic is triggered, is when he is having like extreme emotions.
Maybe they do lock him in the cupboard, but he's able to get out because he can't.
I don't think that they lock the cupboard door all the time. I just wonder if they lock it sometimes. When the snake escapes, that snake had to be caught really soon after it escaped. Let's be real.
I don't know. It doesn't say whether or not they caught him.
No, but like, let's be real.
Yeah, probably. Caught. And of course, Dudley over exaggerates, and so is his friend, about what happened. And it's just, like I said, they automatically blame Harry for what happened. No questions asked, no discussion, nothing. They get home and Uncle Vernon is just like, go, cupboard, stay, no meals.
The Dursleys know that Harry is experiencing magical things, but Harry doesn't know that himself. They're just trying to not let him in on that secret.
And they told him that his parents died in a car accident that he was there for, and that's how he got the scar on his forehead. I don't know how much longer the Dursleys are going to be able to care for Harry.
Yeah, so they are straight up lying to Harry about a lot of things. What I think is most cruel, well, maybe not most cruel, but very cruel, is the fact that they never show him any pictures of his mother.
Well, I don't even know if they have any.
I feel like somewhere Mrs. Dursley could get a picture of Mom, because they were sisters. They have to have something, and I think it's just so cruel that he doesn't even know what his parents are.
I think that once she stopped talking to her, she didn't exist.
Do you think she was one of those people who cut her out of all of the photos?
Oh, for sure. I mean, she had no want or desire to have her sister be a part of her life at all. I think she completely wrote her off. I think she was like so done with him. And of course, she wouldn't have any pictures of James Potter. She kind of blames him for the whole thing, I think.
I agree. Like, it doesn't surprise me that she doesn't show him a picture of James, but not to have anything of Lily, I think that's just kind of cool. I guess she's not wanting to put any type of affection into building a relationship with Harry. Harry's parents didn't choose to leave him, and even in the Dursleys version where they died in a car crash, they didn't choose to leave him. And so I just think it's really telling and really just mean that they didn't have any photos of him at all.
I also think it's really interesting that Harry remembers the motorcycle, but he can't remember his parents at all.
But does he remember the motorcycle?
He dreams about it, and he dreams that it was flying, which it was.
But it's subconscious, so he doesn't really remember that. I mean,
he also in his subconscious.
He also remembers that there was a green flash.
Well, I think that's when he got his scar. He remembers that too, but why can't he remember his parents?
He was only like a year and a little. He was like 16 years old.
The green light and the motorcycle were all on the same day that he lost his parents. Why doesn't he have some inkling about them at all?
I think the green light is because of something else. And I will just say that, me being the Potter expert, the green light is about something else. But I just think maybe the motorcycle's flying, maybe it was just a dream, and it really had nothing to do with Hagrid. We're just correlating it to mean that it had something to do with
I don't know. I mean, why is it coming up again? Why is Mr. Dursley talking about motorcycles? I think for me, there's something significant there. It says when he was younger, he dreamed and dreamed of some unknown relation coming to take him away, but it had never happened. That's Hagrid.
Well, no. I mean, That's not Hagrid. That's just him being in a really crappy situation, saying that, hey, I want to be taken away from the Dursleys. I don't think that has anything to really to do with that. I think that a lot of people in that type of situation would want somebody else to come and pick them up and take them away.
And then he talks about the strangers. He says, yet sometimes or maybe hoped that the strangers in the street seem to know him. They do know him.
How do they know? Okay, how do they know him though? Because he was a baby. Like, how do they know?
Because of the scar. And because I don't think it was a secret in the wizard world where he was, like to the good people, like the people around Dumbledore. So when they talk about the wild looking old woman, I am wondering if that's Professor McGonagall.
Oh, interesting.
And the bald man with the long coat, if that is Dumbledore. But I don't know who the tiny man is though.
Well, Dumbledore's not bald.
No? But I
No.
mean, would he be there as himself? I mean, Professor McGonagall was a cat.
Maybe he put himself into some type of disguise.
Yeah, I think that they are all just biding their time until some moment where they're going to make themselves known to him. I do think that these people that are described at the end of chapter 2 know him.
I agree that they know him. That's really interesting. I never thought that maybe Dumbledore and McGonagall were in disguises. That's who was checking in on Harry and seeing him at these things. But do you think that they would have waved?
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't know who they are, so what difference does it make if they wave? But that's also like a hope that he's hanging on to, that these people know him and somebody's going to take him away. So I think if they just completely ignored him, that would be mean.
That's really an interesting thought.
So I think they've been there. I think that they have watched him grow. They're just waiting for something. They're waiting for a time when it is safe to bring him out.
And you will find out about that time kind of in the next chapter.
Woo, yay.
What do you predict is going to happen in the next chapter?
Well, just based off the title, I think people are going to start reaching out to Harry. I think that the wizard world knows that Harry is special and they're waiting for something, and that time is very quickly approaching. I think Harry's going to find out who he is soon, because right now he has no clue who he is.
All right, well, we'll have to see if your prediction is right.
I hope so. On my character list, I have the snake. I wonder if he's a wizard and who he is, if he's anybody. Mrs. Fig. So you had mentioned in our last episode about cat-loving women.
Yes. Okay, I want to bring this up. Is Mrs. Fig a lesbian?
I don't know. She's old, has a broken leg, and some cats. I can't make a judgment on that.
Or maybe Mrs. Fig is asexual.
I think, I mean, she doesn't have any children of her own, but why, like, does she like Harry? I mean, they said, let's call Marge, and like, no, she hates the boy. So does Mrs. Fig not hate the boy? And she's also referred to as Mrs., so at some point she had to be married.
Or they just really don't give a care about their name. Like, I call people Miss all the time who aren't Mrs., and I call people Mrs. who aren't ever Mrs.
I get because she's old, but then you would just do MS.
Do the Dursleys really care, though?
No, but I mean, if we're going to make an assumption about her, if we're trying to guess a little bit about her, I think the Mrs. to me is telling.
Okay, so she could have been married. She could have been married before. Maybe she was married to a man, and then she realized she was a lesbian, and they got divorced.
And she got some cats.
Yes, because, like, that sounds like a great house to live in with all the cats.
It smells like cabbage. Why would that be a great house to live in?
Probably smells like cabbage because she cooks cabbage.
Cooked cabbage is the worst smell in the world. I have Aunt Marge on my character list. All I know is that she hates Harry and she's Vernon's sister. Now I know that. I have Pierre's Pulchus, who's Dudley's only friend, who is usually the one that's holding the arms of whoever Dudley is beating up.
Pierre does show up later, but he's never like a main character.
And then of course I have the wild-looking old woman in green, the bald man in purple, and a tiny man in violet. My prediction is those three are going to be the ones that take Harry away.
Interesting. I really like the idea that the wild-looking woman is Professor McGonagall and the bald man is Professor Dumbledore. I really like that idea. I think that's a really interesting theory.
In the first chapter, there's no mention of color with Professor McGonagall, I don't believe, because she was the cat. So I don't know if I'm correct in that, but the green and purple are definitely two indications of something.
That's a really good theory.
Shows that like women are in green and men are in purple. I don't know. I need more information on that. But I
Okay.
do know that those colors are significant in something because they're coming up way too much.
I really like this look and perspective from you. Me being a Potter fan forever, there's things that I haven't ever given account to, like colors. And I think it's really interesting hearing your perspective on these things because it's things that I haven't thought of before. And I think that it's giving me a different light and a different kind of perspective on a lot of things with Harry Potter. So it's interesting hearing from a Potter
And I
version.
think that doing my, like reading these for the first time in this particular format, like reading it for a purpose, I'm definitely looking for things that I may not have necessarily looked for just reading it on my own pleasure. I'm definitely trying to pay attention to the details. And like, I think that's where like Bonfire Night came from. If you, as a person who's a Potter expert who just read these books, you never questioned Bonfire Night. But to me, everything could hold some significance to unlocking this book. And I think it's because I'm reading it for that purpose. I'm unlocking this book with you. Me having a different perspective definitely could paint a different picture with the details than maybe you had reading them yourself.
And that's the beauty of this podcast. Yeah. We're now going to choose a character to rate and explain why. Our rating system is on a scale of 1 to 10 wands. 1 wand means the character is a terrible human being. 10 wands means that they're magnificent and rocked the chapter. For this chapter, I am going to rate the school system. The Muggle school system, because I feel like they failed Harry so much. I feel like they should have figured out that Harry was being abused, even if it is just an emotional abuse. I think that they should have figured that out. But Harry also is being deprived of food a lot, and he's like very, very skinny. So the school system should have figured out that Harry was in a bad situation. They didn't know about the wizarding world, but they should know when this kid is getting abused. And so I'm going to rate the school system at 3 wands. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt that maybe Harry wasn't like coming in with bruises and things, but they should have in a parent teacher conference or something figured out that the Dursleys were totally mean to Harry.
Yeah, I think you rated Dumbledore in our last one. I want to talk about Dumbledore. I want to rate him in this one because even though he wasn't physically in this chapter, his presence is still here in the fact that Harry has no clue who he is. And I think that Dumbledore's letter, whatever it said, I don't think it was sufficient enough to the Dursleys to do a better job with him. I think that he had some power there in how he chose to leave Harry with them, and he didn't even consult them whatsoever in person. So for me, Dumbledore right now, again, even though he wasn't physically in this chapter, what's happening to Harry right now, I think could be different had he done things differently. So I would definitely give him 3 wands. I think that things could have been done differently for Harry. If he was still going to leave them with the Dursleys, I think Harry needed to know who he was because his powers are getting him into trouble in the Muggle world, and it's obvious. He got in trouble at school because he was on the roof. I think things could have been handled differently.
I agree. The whole thing of this chapter is I think things could have been handled differently. Yes, maybe Harry didn't need to live at the Dursleys, and we find out reasons that are pretty good later, but I feel like they're not good enough for Dumbledore to have just left him for 2 years.
Definitely. And left him without anything, without any idea of who he is or why he's special.
I think that if maybe Dumbledore didn't want to meet Harry, but he should have came in and checked on the Dursleys at least like once a year to make sure that things were fine and that the Dursleys were doing a good job raising him and not totally abusing him like they are. All right, next time we will be going over chapter 3, The Letters from No One. So if you like this podcast or you just want to support us, subscribe to The Potter Virgin on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, rate and review our show. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at The Potter Virgin or email us at thepottervirgin@gmail.com. We would love to hear your comments, thoughts, opinions. We want to hear what you would rate a character from this episode or from this chapter, and we want to hear from you. What do you think of our show? So, like and subscribe. I guess don't like, just subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcast or Spotify. See you next time.